Good afternoon. I'm Holly Anton. I'm an integrative psychologist at Sutter's Institute of Health and Healing in Santa Rosa. And welcome to the Wellness Call. And as a wellness invitation, I invite you to let yourself arrive and start to notice your breathing. Feel your feet on the ground. Notice the sound in the room around you, the sound of my voice, the sound you may hear coming from outside of the space you're sitting. Locating yourself in this moment, this place, this body, this breath. And I always start with this practice for one thing. I don't think our minds can really take in anything if we don't consciously remember we are the ones in charge of our attention, and it's easy to forget. It's easy to not feel that way. So remembering that you're in charge of where your attention goes also means you have the freedom to place it where you choose. So throughout this call, I invite you to make your own decision about what's best for you. So I will offer some information here. I'm eager to share with you about emotions and how they function and how to make sense of them, make use of them. But at any point through the call where you just need to take care of yourself and not take in new information, just know that I support that. You can always come back to your breath, come back to a simple mindful moment. This information I do think you're going to find interesting, helpful, I hope. Because I'm making a case, you might say, for how emotion-focused mindfulness practice can support your emotional health and your emotional growth. And an emotion-focused mindfulness practice really is nothing more complicated than having a mindfulness practice and allowing that to help you self-observe your internal experience in a way that might feel informative, but also actually help you respond to the life that you're in ways that are more effective, that work better for accomplishing whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. So before I stake my case, you might say, notice that right now, with whatever you feel with your physical body being a part of your experience, there's also an internal sense of yourself, what it feels like to be you. And some of that is sensation, but much of that is much more subtle. So your emotions and your feelings are certainly a part of that. They may be a big part. They may not feel like such a big part at this particular moment. But this part of your being, I could say it's part of your nervous system, but we are more than our solid parts. This emotion system is how it feels to be you. And it's always operating. In fact, I will call this system the emotional response system, and I will explain more why I'm using that term in a moment. But this emotional response system is tied in pretty snugly with our autonomic nervous system, our fight or flight responses, as well as our relaxation responses. And so that turns out to be quite important, quite relevant to how to understand what is happening and how our emotions are designed to work, and also when things go awry, help you understand, at least in part, why they are going awry. So right now, I'll offer just this starting place that the more you can settle in to a relaxed state of awareness, not relaxed sleepy, relaxed awake, the more open you are to experience in general, to the world around you, but the more open you are also to your internal experience. There's a term sometimes in the mental health field when mindfulness practices started to become obviously super helpful to be included as part of our repertoire of things that we can teach and offer people. The term meta-awareness or metacognition, meta-awareness, that is being able to be aware of our thinking, aware of our experience as experience, rather than the more usual autopilot state we are in, which is not making much of a distinction between who we are as a human being and all the things that fill our head and all the experiences that we have in our body and our emotions. So cultivating a mindfulness practice allows you to have quite a few benefits that we already know about. There's health benefits, there's a sense of calm and ease, and here's another, that it allows you to be a more curious and informed consumer, you might say, of your internal news network, that internal way of perceiving what the situation is, creating a story around it that generates a feeling about it, that powers a behavioral response to it. So the more you are tracking your breath right now, the more you are allowing your breath to ease into the lower part of your body, softening your belly, softening your low back on the in-breath, and releasing tension, releasing bracing on the out-breath. This starts to set the stage for a more mindful awareness. So I'll encourage you to do that right now. Check in with your breath. Check in with your awareness of whether or not you're holding tightness. And allow the breath to travel down, not just in, but down through the core of your body. And as you breathe out, allow your muscles and your overall sense of tightness to open, to loosen. And come back into this simple moment, just sitting wherever you're sitting, noticing whatever you are taking in. This practice, as simple as it is, starts to generate what has been called the relaxation response, or the shift from the sympathetic part of the nervous system being in the lead to the relaxation or the parasympathetic nervous system edging into the lead. These two systems are always in a dynamic relationship with each other. Whichever one is a little ahead of the other is, in general, how we experience ourselves as being either relaxed or tense. So present-focused, breath-focused allows that shift. And as we shift toward the relaxation response, we're also able to be more aware of our thinking process as a process rather than our self. Now, what does this have to do with emotions and the emotional response system? Well, when this system is working as it was designed, and it's often working behind the scenes automatically all the time, and when we're in a relatively relaxed state, it works pretty well because our assessment of the moment that we're in will be more present-focused. We're actually going to be paying attention to the moment we are in rather than the moment in our head. As it turns out, the more aroused or the more the sympathetic nervous system is activated, the fight or flight response system, the harder it is for us to be aware of our internal world, and the more likely we are to make certain assumptions, certain distorted interpretations of the event as we perceive it in our head. What do I mean? So let's say there's a 10 p.m. at night, there's a bang, 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 bang on your door. So this could go any number of ways, right? Depending on what that interpretation of that bang, bang, bang on the door is. So let's imagine that that's actually an intruder out there trying to get into your front door. And so that sympathetic response, that anger or fear, is designed to mobilize you, right? Take action of some sort. Now, if it's actually an intruder at the door, that works incredibly well. If it's actually the pizza delivery person, not so much. And we're often in situations like this where we have to assess quickly some new situation, some new novel environment or fantasy. Is it friend or is it foe? To have an emotion-focused mindfulness practice is to start to cultivate the habit of getting curious, of starting to at least look at whether or not our assumptions of what's happening, whether that's the only possible way it could be, whether there may be other alternatives our mind, our automatic sympathetic response mind, hasn't even entertained. Now this is difficult, and it becomes even more difficult when we're under stress, when we're in pain, when we're in an anxiety state or a depressed state. This natural inclination of our system to default to a sympathetic response is very powerful. So it takes a practice, an actual regular mindfulness practice, to start to develop consciousness, really, where consciousness normally takes a back seat to reactivity. Now, with that practice in mind, which, yes, this is my pitch, my hope, that you get even more curious about how your mindfulness practice might benefit you. As you can calm yourself, your whole awareness system, that is also not just this ancient survival system, but your whole, including that lovely fancy frontal lobe that we have, can become more active, more integrated. We're able to see things in a more complex and multifaceted way. And that's what's needed, actually, quite a lot in our modern life. Discerning friend from foe has become not as straightforward as it was when these were tigers and aggressors at the cave. And in fact, we can start to see anything that causes unpleasantness. Any kind of unpleasant sensory experience starts to become tagged as a foe. And that's why I think this is so important. Because to start to view our emotional response itself as a problem greatly diminishes our ability, our strength that we have of assessing things, because our emotional response is an acutely sensitive system. We need it. Now, of course, it is important to make the distinction between the emotion and the story that prompted it, and the distinction between the emotion, which is just a feeling state, and a behavioral urge which comes with it. That's where mindfulness practice comes in handy. Rather than shoot the messenger, which is the emotional state, which can be unpleasant, we don't fall for that. We remember the emotion is just showing up as it is because of the situation and how we're interpreting it. And the situation and our interpretation of it is the first and most powerful thing we have an effect on. We could potentially have an impact. We can change some of that, maybe. And we can certainly make a conscious decision about how we behave, regardless of our feeling state. But the feeling itself is so important because it tells us what story has been activated. See, and that turns out to be that's where we have some power to do something if we remember that we have it. So just for the fun of it, just for the exercise of it, I'd like you to remember a time in the last 24, 48 hours where you had an emotion that was generated by the situation that you were in. This was a holiday weekend. Maybe this was a situation where you found yourself in some sort of social dilemma, or found yourself alone when other people seem to be with others. Whatever your moment was, try to remember it. And take a breath now. Because I'm going to ask you to remember a feeling state, but not lose where you are right now. I want you to hold a dual awareness. On the one hand, you're staying connected to your breath and your body in this moment, while with the other hand, you are recalling a vivid memory, recalling a felt state of something. It could be a positive feeling. A pleasant one could be a neutral but important one, or it could be an unpleasant feeling that you're remembering having. Doesn't matter. Whatever you like. Now, what was the situation, and what was your interpretation of that situation? What was the storyline you held which makes that feeling you had make complete sense? I feel this way because the situation was that, and it seemed to me to be X, Y, or Z. So for instance, I heard my phone ring on Monday with that very unique WhatsApp ring. WhatsApp, it's a phone app. You can get video calls for free over the internet or through cell phones. People in other countries are often using it because it's a much more affordable way of staying in touch. So I knew that it was 95% certain that ring was our daughter in Italy, and our grandson and her husband and what they were doing on their holiday. And all it took was that situation. I hear the phone ring. In my mind runs the fast movie clip before I even answer it of, oh, it's my daughter's face. Oh, here's what I know I can expect. And immediately I'm filled with love and happiness, and what that emotion wants to do is orient toward the phone. I completely forget anything else I'm doing. I find a nice comfy spot for my husband and I to sit and share the phone together, and all of my behavior is now focused and oriented on that activity that was driven by the interpretation, the expectation, then the feeling. Then the behavior follows. No problem. But, I could have made a different interpretation that would lead to a really different response. I could have made the association to someone else calling me who I wasn't so excited about seeing, and I might not have even picked up the phone had I made that interpretation. So I hope after the call you get a chance to reflect a bit on whatever that moment is that you're recalling, and just get curious. Did that interpretation work out okay for you? Did that behavior that you felt compelled to do from that feeling, did it actually serve you? I hope it did. And if it didn't, there's a clue that maybe the interpretation was off in some respect, or maybe the situation you were responding to was the one in your head and not the one in reality. Why can I say this? Just because this is what we as human beings are doing all the time. At best, our thoughts are about the moment we're in. That's actually pretty rare. More typically, our thoughts are about a moment we're not in and might not even exist. So learning how to get curious and turn your attention to your inner world, especially when there are noticeable feeling states active, allows you to make use of these emotions. They're here to serve you. They're here to mobilize you, to put fuel in whatever vehicle it is, whatever behavior, to give you energy to get something done, because that's what emotions are best at, generating energy to accomplish a job. Anger, yeah, it wants to accomplish self-protection by defending territory or warding off aggressors, right? Excellent, when that's really what's happening. Fear, self-protective device when that protects our body when fighting looks like it's not likely to be helpful or could put us in more danger. Great when that's actually the case. Guilt, terrific, painful really unpleasant experience, but it's our inner alarm system when our behavior has strayed across the boundary that we've decided is the boundary that decent people don't cross. Guilt is our internal warning system when our sense of self is threatened by our own behavior crossing a boundary. Great, if it's based on a true story. Sadness, wonderful emotion because it prompts the impulse to offer comfort to ourselves, and if we are open enough to express it, to let it show, it generates that same impulse in others around us, usually. The impulse to comfort. That's not manipulation of sadness. By sadness, that's sadness's job. That's its function, is to prompt the impulse to comfort. These incredibly advanced systems that come out of our ancient nervous system are wonderful, but they need supervision. They need someone staying curious. They need you to stay curious about whether or not the storyline is accurate. Well, I hope you found this information interesting at least, helpful at best, and that you're able to take a few minutes after the call here. Take some quiet time if you have it. Remember, this practice always starts out with just coming back into the moment that you are. This breath, this body, this felt sense of you being you. And from that place, if you decide to reflect on some recent emotion experience, I think you'll find it much more easy to do. Always start with this settling, calming presence. And then any tool you use, any attempt you make to help yourself is way more likely to be effective. And sometimes coming back into this moment is really the only tool you need. It's really only this moment that needs your response right now. Your attention, your curiosity, your openness, your gentleness.